Hello there, I'm Rich Lowry with National Review.
I'm Michael Tomasky with The Guardian.
Michael, good seeing you.
Likewise, Rich. How are you?
Good. So I thought we'd start talking about the general state of the race, which I think for just about everyone is extraordinarily closer than anyone would have expected, certainly than I expected. I think probably the last time we talked, I was still on my theory that the race would be a lot like 1976. You have a terrible environment for the party that's in power. You have a winsome challenger who's captured a mood for change and who soars ahead to a huge lead in the polls, which is steadily chipped away in the fall. And instead, we haven't seen that at all. We've seen quite a close race. A bunch of polls out this week. A couple show Obama slightly ahead. A few show McCain slightly ahead. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're seeing, among other things, is the fruit of a much more effective and disciplined McCain campaign. And I think McCain basically got through the primaries basically without a campaign, without a fundraising operation, with just some loyalists around him and not much of the way in the way of an organization. And it took him months to basically make the decisions necessary to have a real national campaign. And that's, to me, was the significance of having Steve Schmidt take over at the top of the McCain campaign. And he's imposed discipline, one, on the staff, two, on the candidate. They stopped having McCain do, I thought, these ridiculous and self-destructive impromptu sessions with the press every day, where it just meant whatever the story of that day was going to be whatever McCain messed up. Whatever gaffe he made with the press, stepping all over his own message and sometimes contradicting his own campaign aides. So that was key. And then the big thing, I think, was these ads, starting with the celeb ad, going after Obama in a much more sustained and negative way. I think the ads, if McCain wins this thing in the fall, the ads will be seen as a turning point, and ads will deserve a lot of close study because they're really brilliant and interesting for negative ads in the sense that has there ever been, a negative ad before where you show a candidate giving a speech before thousands of devoted people waving American flags like they did in that first Brittany in Paris ad. Yeah. All these ads, they show Obama in an incredibly flattering light. He's smiling, he looks good, he looks young. And of course, this is, as everyone now realizes, seems to have been pretty effective jiu-jitsu, where instead of dragging Barack Obama down, the McCain campaign has been trying to pump him up and use his own strengths against him to make him seem this larger-than-life celebrity politician who is drunk on his own fame and words and is disconnected from the rest of us.
Yeah, they've been effective. I mean, I should say for the record that I think they've been sometimes been kind of silly and sometimes been, completely false, but, they have been effective. There's no denying that. And I think that I blame the Obama campaign for not having done something similar. And I've been writing, I remember that I had to write a piece for The Guardian to have it ready to go back in April, just in case Obama had beaten Clinton in the Pennsylvania primary, just in case he had beaten her, and he would have at that point been the de facto nominee. So they wanted me to write a piece that said, okay, he's the de facto nominee, here are the X number of things he has to do now, and I came up with 5. And I think the first 2 of the 5 were, number 1, redefine himself positively, because he's now been in this tough campaign, and he's taken all these punches from the Clinton people, and so he has to, re-establish his positive narrative. And number 2, redefine John McCain in a negative way, because John McCain has, as we all know, this reputation. I'm sure you think it's deserved. I think it's he has the reputation far more than he deserves, but he has the reputation of being the independent maverick type and so on and so forth. The Obama people are going to have to put dents in that reputation, and they're going to have to start early, because that reputation is very, very deeply wired into people's brains, and it's going to take a long, long time to undo it. Now, so what's happened? The McCain campaign has done a good job of defining Obama, has done an excellent job of defining Obama. And in fact, I think Obama's going to have a hard time getting a big bounce out of the convention unless something really exceptional and interesting happens, because even if he gets 90,000 people at that speech, and gives one of the greatest speeches in the history of American politics. The McCain attacks have set it up such that they can go on TV and say, well, more pretty words from a pretty guy. What do you, so they've done a very good job of that. And the Obama people fell down this summer on defining McCain. They've just now started. To me, their attacks are strong, but quite unfocused at this point.
Yeah, well, I think what the thing the Obama people have to be wary of, I think there's a real pit he risks falling into in the conventional wisdom on the left, which was that John Kerry was destroyed by not responding quickly enough and harshly enough to the Swift boat attacks, which is kind of hearted into this conventional wisdom that whatever attack you face, go nuclear.
Sort of left-right debate here, but that's okay, because these things do happen to be true. But I mean, I think that the Krugman critique of Obama, which has been ongoing throughout the year, as you know, is more valid. His last couple of columns, I think, have been pretty right on. It's more valid now during the general election campaign than it was in the primary campaign. I think that the Obama campaign is having a hard time coming up with that phrase or that statement with some emotional power to it that expresses the right kind of economic populism that Obama needs to express here, and that makes the right kinds of distinctions between him and McCain. Again, this is something that I think the McCain campaign has actually been doing pretty well. I would say sometimes quite dishonestly, but in campaign terms, pretty well. I think "Country First" is a great slogan for John McCain. I think it's really smart. It's not overtly, subtextually too much of anything. It's right. It's good, and I think it works for them very well. And the Obama campaign has proven less adroit at coming up with those kinds of things, and particularly on economics. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking to his convention speech and to the convention as a whole to see that he comes up with that, putting people first or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah. Well, Michael, talk a little bit about one thing that's striking, especially in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll that came out, is these Hillary voters still have a resistance to Barack Obama. And it was conventional wisdom on the right, and I shared it, just as of a day ago, that the convention was way too weighted to the Clintons. You didn't need to have Bill and Hillary have their own nights. You didn't have to have, Hillary's name put in a nomination, a roll call vote necessarily. That this was the Clintons hijacking the convention and showing about how weak Obama is. But given the resistance of those voters and how key they are, and if they were with Obama, he'd have not a huge, but probably a reasonably comfortable lead. All those decisions to pander, if that's the way you want to put it, to the Clintons, look a little shrewder, don't they?
Oh, I think they do. Look, you can't gainsay the importance of 20% of the people in your own party saying that they're not going to vote for you. 18%, 20, 25%, whatever it is. That's millions of people, and a lot of them are in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio, states where she beat him and beat him pretty soundly. So he obviously has to do all he can. Maybe up to and including the vice presidency. We don't want to talk too much about the Democrats and the vice presidency here, I think, because we might get burned by events. We're doing this end of day Thursday. It's going to be posted sometime Friday. Events could intercede. But it's really interesting to me how this Hillary drumbeat has started up again. Now, as Mark Halpern said today on the page, it's based on nothing. Except, if thousands of people are having this intuition at the same time, maybe that's not nothing. Maybe that's actually something.
Well, if you just, on paper, you said, there's a candidate out there who has some experience, maybe not quite as much as she wanted to portray it during the primary campaigns, but can connect with down-market, working-class voters, who's absolutely comfortable in the role of an attack dog. There's no question about that. She's a woman, and literally no one would be better at connecting with Hillary voters. You would snatch that person up in a minute. And I think the problem here is that probably the way the Obama people viewed the race, even a month ago, is a lot different, I would think, than the way they're viewing it now. And right after the primaries ended, you could think more, well, we have the luxury of not having to deal with the Clintons anymore. And we can think about, what's a good choice once we're in the White House, someone who's going to be loyal and someone who's not going to be as messy with having Bill around, and heaven knows, what kind of craziness in his business dealings or how he's going to be popping off every day. But now it looks a lot different.
It looks a lot different, and I was very much against her for some of those reasons that you just mentioned. But last couple of days, I've been thinking and talking with some friends. We're saying, hey, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. But it seems still to me quite unlikely, as I'm sure it does to you. So even if, assuming that she's not the vice presidential choice, then the question is the original one you posed, which is, what does Obama need to do to get her voters? And, this is proving a tougher problem than I bet he and Plouffe and Axelrod imagined that it was going to be. And, I think it's going to take some time, and she is really going to have to do her part and really lean on her voters. And for that gives her leverage, of course, with Obama, and for that she will extract, I assume, some kind of price from him, because why shouldn't she? She'll be in a position to. Bill is going to continue to make the kind of mischief he's been making out in Las Vegas, saying that John McCain and Barack Obama both had good climate change proposals, and he'll spend the whole time doing things like that. So it's going to be a tough, assuming she's not the vice president, which I think we can assume, it's going to be a tough thing for Obama, and he's not going to get 80% of her people. He might get 65% of them, but how many thousands of votes difference is that in the state of Ohio? I don't know. I have no idea, but could be dispositive.
I'd also think for Hillary's long-term interest, even if she secretly wants to see Obama lose, and apparently from all the reporting expects him to lose, she really has to be seen on her end going out of her way to do everything to help him. And I would think especially at the convention, given how much space and time the Clintons are being granted, that she really has to make this seem as much as possible all about Obama. Yeah. And I would really be shocked if you probably know more about the details and the logistics of how a roll call vote would work there in Denver, but I'd be shocked if they went all the way through it without at some point Hillary dramatically pulling the plug and saying, look, let's do this by acclamation. This is the future of the country is too important, and it's too important that our party unite around Barack Obama.
Yeah, I think she has to be the one to do that, and I'm glad I'm not the one negotiating that on the part of the Obama campaign.
I know. I also, we don't want to get too much into the Democratic veeps because we could be overtaken by events, but I know from talking to Republicans and the McCain campaign, they pretty much think they have a pretty good opening to critique Biden, Kaine, Sebelius. They think all those possibilities create nice openings for them. I think less so Evan Bayh. And Evan Bayh, I've always thought would be the best choice for Obama, but he's gotten beaten up pretty well in the left-wing blogosphere. But I think Obama just needs a boring choice. He needs someone who has been around the block a couple times, and it would be nice to have someone from out in the Midwest. And I'm told people, Republicans in Indiana, think that Bayh on the ticket would legitimately put Indiana in place. That's a little bit of a benefit. But I think that the two governors, Sebelius and Kaine, you get the lack of experience, most inexperienced ever kind of critique. And Joe Biden, you're going to get the messiness with Biden having voted for the Iraq War originally, which Barack Obama says is such an important judgment call. And then I just, I don't know Biden well, and people who know him say he's a delightful guy, but I just, buy the conventional wisdom about him that he's just a gaffe, waiting to happen every minute. And he, to me, would reinforce the kind of the arrogance and gassiness side to Obama that Republicans are very eager to pump up as much as possible. Yeah,
he may. That's a reasonable point. I mean, the fair thing, of course, now on the Iraq War, Bayh voted for it too, and Bayh was more fervently pro-war than Biden was. So if you're going to pick Bayh, you can't really disqualify Biden on those grounds. The only plus of Biden is that he's got stature and he can go toe to toe with McCain, and he'll really throw punches at McCain in a way that Bai won't. I don't know who it's going to be, but if it's going to be Biden, it makes me wonder, why didn't you just have him on board? I mean, I understand these are processes, whatever, but if it's going to be Biden, there's been so much drama around this. One of these people, Biden by Kane, doesn't quite fulfill the drama that has attended this process,
Yeah.
So
it's going to be a little bit
of a letdown somehow.
Well, you have exactly the same dynamic on the Republican side, because after all the sturm and drang about a pro-choicer or Joe Lieberman on the ticket, if it's Tim Pawlenty or Mitt Romney, it's going to feel a little bit of a letdown to everyone except for pro-life conservatives, who will be absolutely ecstatic. Yeah. And of course, that's been part of the theory this week, is the McCain people are deliberately floating the pro-choice idea to enhance the appeal and the relief factor, if you will, if it's a more standard pro-life Republican. I think they're actually, from all the indications I can get, they're very seriously considering Joe Lieberman, and at least they have up to this point. I think it would be a mistake, and I kind of get pulled both ways on this, because I still believe that John McCain's pretty serious underdog in this race. He's probably going to have to take some risks, shake it up to win. But when it comes to every particular risk that people talk about, whether it's Joe Lieberman or the one-term pledge, I see a lot of problems with it too. And of course, there's the theory that Lieberman would play perfectly into a one-term pledge. You'd have both the president and vice president saying, look, we're just going to be here 4 years, acting in a non-ideological, post-partisan way to solve the nation's problems. And that makes some sense. But I think in attempting to reestablish or reinforce McCain's maverick brand in such a manner by having a one-term pledge and a Democrat on the ticket, it could hurt his other brand, which may be even more important, which is the I'm the experienced steady hand at the wheel brand. Yeah. Because there's something about having a Democrat on the ticket, and there's something about a one-term pledge that are so outside the box. There's something unsettling about them, and there's something. It could get very convoluted if Lieberman basically has to promise, to follow through on McCain's priorities if anything should happen to McCain in office, or nominate the same sort of judges. It gets very gimmicky feeling. So I guess I'm leaning against both of those ideas at the moment.
Yeah, it's really gimmicky and it's really abstract, and I have a really hard time imagining that if he were actually elected, and a man is actually the President of the United States, and he's waking up every morning with that power and in those trappings and in those surroundings, he's going to voluntarily give it up? I don't believe it.
As a friend of mine said, once you're outside Marine One and you get that salute, that's pretty hard to give up.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I don't see Lieberman happening as a vice presidential pick either, and I think, for most of the reasons that you say, I wish it would happen. I think it would be a disaster for McCain, but I don't think he's going to do it. I bet you, though, that you're right, that there's a part of him that would really love to do it, because that old, sneaky, malevolent guy who sits in the back of the Senate Republican caucus meeting and throws spitballs is still in there somewhere. So he'd like to do it, and I'm sure he's pissed off deep down at, I've kowtowed these people on taxes, on this, on that, what do they want from me? Let me do one thing. But he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. Let me ask you what you think of Giuliani as the keynoter.
I don't get that. Yeah. I haven't heard a persuasive explanation for why it makes sense. He feels like yesterday's news. He was he the keynoter in 2000 or in 2004, or just one of the key speakers?
Well, I guess Miller was the keynoter, but wasn't that 2004 that was Zell Miller?
I think that's right.
He and Schwarzenegger were very prominently featured speakers.
Big speaking part. And that was when the convention was in New York, and when the attacks of 9/11 were much fresher in everyone's mind, and prior to Rudy running one of the worst presidential campaigns in memory. So to me, that speaks to a certain, and this plays into McCain's veep choice as well, a certain thinness in the Republican bench. If you want to, the highest profile young up-and-comers, you have Mitt Romney. Some people have a problem with him on the right, but Tim Pawlenty, Bobby Jindal, Sarah Palin, and that's it. Yeah. and Jindal and Palin just aren't there yet. So this is a party that has a lot of rebuilding to do and really needs in 2010 to elect some governors. You know, John Kasich in Ohio, or maybe a Rudy Giuliani here in New York, but really needs to build up that bench again and try again to reach that state Republicans were in the 80s, where you had these reformist governors, Engler and Thompson and whatnot, who were developing innovative ideas and were the next generation of the party's leadership, and it's just not obvious, you know, what that next generation is at the moment. So you go to your old reliables from last time around, Rudy Giuliani and Arnold Schwarzenegger, both of whom are you know, reduced from the position they were in 2004.
Well, but Schwarzenegger is not even going, right? Didn't I read that he's not going to the convention?
Is that right?
I think I read corrected. That, but you know, at any rate, he's not. Yeah, as you say, his profile has changed considerably from 2004. He'd halfway be just as likely to show up at a Democratic convention the way he's been governing California. But yeah, I agree. I was underwhelmed by the Rudy choice, and I thought it was kind of strange. I mean, I guess, you know, he'll get ratings and he'll get attention, and you know, to the kinds of people that they want to reach. I suppose he still has a kind of moral authority, a halo that wasn't too dimmed by his disastrous presidential run. But I don't know. I did think it was weird. And you know, I mean, there's, you know, the Republican House caucus better than I do. Is there nobody there who's a comer and a great speaker?
I don't know about great speaker. There's some comers. I mean, one of whom has been talked about as a long shot vice presidential possibility, Eric Cantor.
Right.
There's Adam Putnam, who has a position in leadership from down in Florida. There's Paul Ryan, a young member from Wisconsin who's quite substantive and intelligent. But these are the guys who are waiting. If you know, if the party gets shellacked again in the House, I think you can probably see yet another round of leadership challenges in the House, and these are the guys who are kind of lined up to take the next step. But Republicans really need they need it to be about 1978, the way it was back then, when you had someone in the House, Jack Kemp, who was, you know, youthful, energetic, and interested enough in ideas to develop some innovative policy that really set the table for the next time Republicans won the presidency. Now, I'm not discounting the possibility they'll win it this year, but they even if McCain wins, the party is going to be in a state where the intellectual and policy cupboard is still going to be pretty bare, and it needs a lot of work.
No dissent here. Next issue.
So, McCain's house.
Yeah.
Outraged? Houses, I should say.
I mean, I've been waiting for this to become a story for a while. I think it's a story. I think it's a legitimate story. Like I was saying earlier, you know, character relates to issues, and you know, you need to get something that grabs people emotionally. It's obviously not a sign of weak character on John McCain's part that he happens to have married someone who's worth many millions of dollars and owns many houses. That's not the connection, but
we should all have such weak characters.
Exactly. I'd settle for that. But you know, it can be. When I say the word character, I mean, you know, out of touch with the common person's concerns and all that sort of thing. So you know, I think this is a real thing, and you know, the Obama people are obviously hot on it. The liberal blogosphere is obviously really hot on it. I think it's a big issue. I don't think it alone is a game changer of an issue. I think it's a good opportunity to reverse the momentum that has clearly been against the Obama people up to this point. Now, McCain's campaign fired back with a very strong statement earlier Thursday afternoon that brought up Resco and the circumstances under which Obama bought his house. And I took that to mean, okay, Axelrod, if you're going to go here, we're going to go down the Resco road, and you're going to regret it. And that's a challenge, and that's a challenge that the Obama people ought to take pretty seriously and give some thought to. But I still think that they've got to press this because this is it's just a no-brainer. I mean, if we heard a lot about John Kerry's fancy house on Beacon Hill and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's totally fair game.
Yeah, I think if you don't know how many houses you have, that's a gaffe by any standards. No question a gaffe. How much mileage ultimately can they get out of it? I don't know. I don't think it behooves Obama to have a battle of biographies with John McCain, just because I think John McCain has the ultimate trump card there.
Right.
And but it's interesting. You can always read these two ways. Is it in terms of the McCain response, is that kind of a desperation and shows they've been stung, or is it sort of gleeful, okay, now we can really get it on? And it wasn't just the Resco in response to the houses thing. The day prior, when the Obama people were dinging John McCain for the fundraiser in Atlanta where Ralph Reed was helping raise money, the McCain people came right back and went immediately to Bill Ayers' unrepentant terrorists. Yeah. So I think, a couple things. One, I think both of these guys, Obama and McCain, are, in a sense, a product of cloistered elites that aren't necessarily that connected to the everyday concerns of most people in this country as it's lived every day. Barack Obama, the Ivy League and kind of a Hyde Park liberalism. John McCain, a naval royalty, if you will.
Right.
And I think one of the most interesting aspects of that NBC Wall Street Journal poll, or maybe it was another poll, it might have been the New York Times CBS, is people saying, we think this election's about the economy. Wouldn't it be great if both of these guys were talking about the economy and telling us what they think about the economy? And neither of them have connected on that issue. And this brings us back to the ever-present Hillary hovering over this campaign. It was sort of a funny thing that among the three of them, the one who lost in the primaries, Hillary Clinton, I think, was the one who most got this and most connected with ordinary people.
Yeah. Well, I think Obama's in a difficult position here because, aspects of his biography are so unusual and alien to your average American, or let's face it, your average white American. He went to Harvard, but Rich, before that, his parents didn't, he wasn't a legacy admission to Harvard Law School. I mean, he worked his way there, and, he grew up in not by any means poor or difficult circumstances, but certainly modest circumstances. So he earned his way to Harvard. He didn't.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't suggest otherwise.
He didn't skip his way into the place. So he does have something he can say along those lines. And McCain married into his millions, and he can't really go there. But I suppose you're right that the ultimate trump card is the 5.5 years where that McCain can always fall back on if it gets into these biographical things. But that's why it's important, I think, for Obama to use something like the houses to talk about, not to get into a fight about biography, but to talk about the issue of the economy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk, Michael, about one last issue that was a hot button this week and caused a lot of angry debate on the blogosphere and on cable TV, which is this Born Alive Infants Act, which became hot after the Saddleback Forum when David Brody interviewed Barack Obama and asked him about evidence that the National Right to Life Committee had come up with, that this Born Alive Infant Act, which is protecting infants who survive an abortion and declaring that they're persons once they're outside the womb, that this had passed quite handily in Congress, and Barack Obama had opposed it when it was in Illinois. And Barack Obama said, well, gosh, I would have supported the federal version just like everyone else, but our version here in Illinois did not have the same so-called neutrality clause, saying that the legislation didn't affect Roe v. Wade one way or the other, and that's why I opposed it in Illinois. And the National Right to Life Committee came up with documents showing that, well, actually, there was a neutrality clause in one of the versions of that bill that Barack Obama voted down, that Obama actually voted for the amendment to include the neutrality clause and then voted against it anyway. And this became a particularly hot issue because Obama used the L word, saying that they were lying about his record, where it turned out that actually they were accurately representing it. And to me, this just got to a contradiction that is a key flaw in Obama's candidacy, which I don't think really has anything pretty much in his record that matches his rhetoric of being this post-partisan unifying figure. And one of the great appeals of Obama is, in his speeches and in his second campaign book, he's always had this pose of being very thoughtful and tortured about the issues and understanding the other side. But when it comes right down to it, he's been, has a partisan, very left record, and this vote in particular shows that he had a very left record. In fact, to the left of people like Jerry Nadler in Congress, who voted for the federal version.
Yeah, he's taken a couple of votes since he's been in the Senate, like the tort reform bill, and was the most high profile. But there were a few others where he didn't quite take the orthodox line, and he worked with, of all people, with Tom Coburn on that Sunshine, ethics reform package. So he has a little bit of a record, but granted, he's only been in the Senate for a few years, so he doesn't have that much of a record. I read your column. I don't know really the facts of this. I suppose it's possible that he didn't know that the Illinois legislation had that same language.
Oh, he did. He voted for the amendment that had this neutrality clause. And now, it gets in the weeds. Now they're shifting to an explanation, the Obama people, that it wasn't this piece of legislation in particular that he objected to. It was something that was in some sense a companion piece of legislation that had to do with, and I don't know the details here myself very well, had to do with holding doctors liable if care was withheld to these infants after they were born. And that's what he really had an objection to, and that's why he voted against the Born Alive Infants Act. But this is a shifting explanation, and the fact is it was a bad week for him on this because the initial explanation turned out to be false, even as he was calling his critics liars.
Yeah. Well, bad if true, no question about it. I think that on the general issue of abortion, there's not going to be nobody's going to take a very nuanced position between now and November 4th, I don't think. And we also have news this week. I think just yesterday I read that McCain is certainly, I had read this earlier back in May, that he was considering, but now apparently he's certainly not going to make any effort to change the Republican Party platform on abortion, which calls for no exceptions: rape, incest, threat to the mother's life. McCain has always supported those exceptions, and he used to say that he was going to be for those exceptions and try to push those exceptions into the Republican Party platform. But he's now obviously not going to try to push those exceptions into the Republican Party platform. I think another sign that he's probably not going to have Joe Lieberman as his vice president. Also the fact that his advisor or liaison to the Republican Party platform committee on these kinds of issues is none other than Sam Brownback. So it's an indication of where he's going here. So, if you're right and it's fair to say that Obama represents an extreme position on abortion on the left, then I think it's also reasonably fair to say that McCain is embracing the extreme position on the right as well.
Yeah, although I think there's actually, and we'll get into the weeds of the polling data here, that there's actually less support for the pro-choice extreme position than there is for the pro-life extreme position. Or maybe I'm saying that wrong. I think certainly people support more restrictions on abortion than Barack Obama supports, since he supports quite literally none. Yeah. But then, they don't support John McCain's position either. But I think, in those key states, Ohio and Pennsylvania, I think this is a good issue for John McCain, and one he shouldn't be scared of.
So you think, if McCain this is interesting, and I honestly don't know what I think about this, but you think if McCain presses that issue and explains it as you've explained it in a state like Ohio, and the Obama people counter by saying John McCain is now no longer even in favor of exception for rape, incest.
I don't think. I don't think McCain could let that be the party's platform be his position. He would just say, for whatever reason, I couldn't change it. I didn't want to bother to change it. But this is my position, and that I've held for my 30 years in public life.
So he can take a position different from the Republican Party platform.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty much. I think that language has been in there a long time, and besides Alan Keyes, I don't know whether we've ever had a Republican presidential candidate who's actually supported that specific language.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I say we're done.
Okay. Michael, thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.